In the quiet town of Eldridge, where whispers ride the wind and shadows move with purpose, Elias discovers his name carved into his cottage steps, a mark that binds him to a cosmic horror older than the stars. As the carving spread, names of people, places, even the void itself, Elias, Amara, and Cillian must unravel the secrets of a mad astronomer's mansion and face the old ones, ancient entities hungry for souls. With each ritual, they fight to break the eternal marks, but every step pulls them deeper into a web of darkness that threatens to bind the world forever. Will they shatter the chains of fate, or become part of the shadow's endless hunger? Chapter 1. The Whispering Shadows. In a small town called Eldridge, nestled between tall hills and thick woods, lived a young man named Elias. He was 25, with dark hair that fell over his eyes and a quiet way about him. Elias worked as a bookkeeper in the old library, where dust danced in the sun rays that slipped through cracked windows. The town was old, full of stone houses with roofs that sagged like tired shoulders. People there spoke in low voices, as if afraid the wind might carry their words to wrong ears. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in deep reds and purples, Elias walked home along the winding path. Leaves crunched under his boots and the air smelled of rain about to fall. He lived alone in a small cottage his grandfather had left him. The old man had been a strange sort, always muttering about shadows and stars. Elias missed him, but the stories seemed like nonsense from a mind gone soft with age. As he reached his door, something caught his eye. On the stone step, right where the light from his lantern hit, there was a mark. It looked like a name carved into the rock. Elias, it read, in letters that twisted like vines. He bent down, touched it with his fingers. The cuts were fresh, edges sharp, but no chips of stone lay around. Who could have done this? Kids playing tricks? But the town kids feared his place, called it haunted because of his grandfather's tales. He shook his head, went inside, lit a fire in the hearth. The room filled with warm glow, pushing back the chill. Elias made tea, sat in his chair with a book. But his mind kept going back to the carving. Shadows in the room seemed longer than usual, stretching like fingers across the floor. He told himself it was just the fire playing games. That night, sleep came hard. Dreams filled his head. Vast spaces with stars that pulsed like hearts, and shadows that moved on their own, whispering names. He woke with a start, sweat on his brow. The clock showed midnight. Outside wind howled through trees. Then he heard it. A soft scratch, like nails on stone. Heart pounding, he grabbed his lantern, went to the door. The carving was still there, but now another name joined it. Amara. Who was Amara? He didn't know anyone by that name. The scratches sounded again from the side of the house. He followed, lantern high. Around the corner, on the wall, more marks appeared as he watched. Shadows from the trees danced, and where they touched the stone, lines formed. It was like the dark itself was carving. Elias stepped back, breath quick. "This can't be," he muttered. But his eyes saw true. The shadow of a branch twisted, etched, lost, next to the names. He ran inside, barred the door, sat by the fire till dawn, eyes wide. Morning came gray and misty. Elias went to town hoping for answers. The library was his first stop. Old Mrs. Harrow, who ran it, greeted him with a nod. She was bent with age, eyes sharp as pins. "You look pale, boy. Bad night?" He told her about the carvings, left out the moving shadows. She frowned, tapped her chin. "Your grandfather spoke of such things. Said shadows carry secrets from beyond. Names carved mean fates tied." Elias laughed, but it sounded forced. "Old tales, Mrs. Harrow. Probably just vandals." She shook her head. "Go see the old mansion on the hill. Your grandfather spent time there. Might find clues." The mansion. It stood empty for years, a Gothic pile of stone and towers, vines choking its walls. Folks said it was cursed, built by a mad astronomer who stared at stars till he went insane. Elias had never gone near it, but curiosity pulled him. After work, he hiked up the hill, The path was overgrown, thorns snagging his coat. The mansion loomed, windows like empty eyes. Door creaked open at his push, unlocked as if waiting. Inside, dust thick, air stale. Furniture draped in sheets, like ghosts. He wandered rooms, found a study with books on stars and ancient lore. On a desk, a journal, his grandfather's handwriting. Elias sat, read by fading light. The shadows come from the void between stars, it said. They carve names of those chosen, binding them to cosmic forces. I saw them first here, in this house. They whisper truths too big for minds. A chill ran down his spine. Outside, sunset, shadows grew, then scratching again. On the wall, a shadow from the window frame moved, carved Elias once more. He dropped the journal, backed away. But the shadow followed, stretching toward him. It touched his hand, cold as space. Whispers filled his ears, names, endless names, from worlds far away. Visions flooded his mind, vast blackness, stars dying, entities of dark that hungered for light. He fled the mansion, ran down the hill. Home, he barred everything. But shadows slipped under doors, through cracks. That night they carved on his walls, his floor. Names of strangers, of ancestors, of beings not human. By morning, Elias knew he was marked. The shadows had chosen him to uncover secrets buried in Gothic depths and cosmic heights. His journey began into horror and wonder. Chapter 2. The ancient mansion's secret Elias stood outside the old mansion on the hill, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air was heavy, smelling of wet leaves and something older, like stone left untouched for centuries. The mansion loomed before him, its Gothic towers piercing the gray sky, windows dark as empty sockets, vines twisted up its walls, thick and gnarled, like they were trying to choke the life from the stone. His heart beat fast, not just from the climb up the thorny path, but from what happened last night. The shadows that moved, carving his name, and another, Amara, into his cottage steps. He still felt their cold touch, like icy fingers brushing his skin. Beside him stood Amara, the woman he'd met in town that morning. She was tall, with pale skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and eyes like storm clouds, gray and restless. Her dark hair was tied back, but loose strands danced in the wind. Elias had gone to the bakery, asking if anyone knew an Amara, desperate for answers about the carved name. She'd been there buying bread and overheard him. "That's me," she said, voice soft but steady, like a river over smooth stones. When he told her about the carvings, her face went pale. "I've seen them too," she whispered. "On my windowsill, my name and yours." Now here they were, at the mansion his grandfather's journal pointed to. Elias clutched the journal, its leather cover worn soft from years of handling. The words inside burned in his mind. The shadows come from the void between stars. They carve names to bind fates. He didn't understand it, but the mansion felt like the only place to find answers. Amara, too, seemed drawn to it, though her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her coat. "You sure about this?" Elias asked, voice low. The wind howled, making the trees creak like old bones. Amara nodded, but her eyes flicked to the mansion's door, half open, swaying slightly. "We have to know why our names were chosen, why the shadows are alive." Elias swallowed hard, pushed the door. It groaned, loud and deep, like a warning. Inside, the air was thick with dust, swirling in the faint light from cracked windows. The floorboards creaked under their steps, and the smell of mold and old wood filled their noses. Furniture sat draped in white sheets like ghosts waiting to rise. Cobwebs hung in corners, swaying like thin fingers. Elias held up his lantern, its warm glow pushing back the dark, but the shadows seemed to fight it, clinging to the edges of the light. "Where do we start?" Amara asked, her voice echoing in the vast hall. Portraits lined the walls, faces of stern men and women, their eyes seeming to follow them. Elias shivered. The house felt alive, watching. "The study," he said, remembering the journal. "Grandfather wrote about it. Said he found things here, books, maps, stuff about the stars." They moved through the mansion, passing rooms with heavy curtains, chandeliers coated in dust, and mirrors that reflected their faces too clearly, like the glass was hungry for their image. Every step made the floor groan, and every shadow seemed to twitch. Elias kept glancing back, sure he'd see something move, but it was just the two of them. Or so he hoped. The study was at the end of a long hall, its door carved with strange symbols, spirals and lines that looked like stars connected by threads. Elias pushed it open, and a gust of cold air hit them, smelling of old paper and something sharp, like metal. Inside, shelves towered to the ceiling, packed with books so old their spines cracked when touched. A desk sat in the center, covered in maps, a telescope and stacks of papers yellowed with age. The window behind it was huge, arched but boarded up, letting in only slivers of light. Amara ran her fingers along a shelf, pulling out a book. Its cover was black with no title, just a symbol like the one on the door, a spiral with sharp edges. She opened it, and the pages were filled with drawings of stars, strange words in a language neither knew, and sketches of shadows with eyes. "This isn't normal," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "These aren't just stories." Elias went to the desk, found another journal, not his grandfather's. The handwriting was spidery, uneven, like the writer was scared or crazy. "Property of Thaddeus Varn," it read on the first page. "Astronomer and seeker of truths beyond." Elias's stomach twisted. Thaddeus Varn was the mansion's builder, the madman who stared at stars until he lost his mind. The town said he vanished one night, leaving the mansion empty. He read aloud, "The shadows are not of this world. They come from the spaces between, where light dies and names are born. I saw them in my telescope moving in the dark of the cosmos. They whispered my name, carved it into my walls. I invited them, fool that I was. They seek vessels, souls to anchor their will." Amara's eyes widened. "Vessels? You think that's us?" Before Elias could answer, a sound came. Scratch, 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 like nails on stone. It came from the walls, the floor, everywhere. The lantern flickered, shadows dancing wildly. Elias spun around, heart racing. On the wall behind the desk, where a shadow from the telescope fell, lines formed. Slowly, deliberately, they carved Elias and Amara in twisting letters. "Get back!" Elias shouted, pulling Amara away. The shadow stretched, long and thin, reaching for them. It touched the floor, and more names appeared. Old names, strange names, some in symbols that hurt to look at. The air grew colder, heavy, like it was pressing down on their chests. "We need to leave," Amara said, voice shaking but firm. But Elias couldn't move. The journal's words echoed in his head. They carved to bind fates. He grabbed the telescope, heavy and cold, and swung it at the wall. The shadow screamed, a sound like wind through a broken window, and vanished. The carving stopped, but the name stayed, glowing faintly. "We can't just run," Elias said, panting. "We need to know what this is. Why us?" Amara nodded, though her hands still shook. "Then we keep looking, but we stay together." They searched the study, pulling books, flipping through maps. One map caught Elias's eye, a star chart, but the stars weren't right. They pulsed in patterns, connected by lines that formed a shape like a door. Notes in the margin, in Varn's shaky hand, read, "The gate lies below. The shadows guard it." "Below?" Amara said, looking at the floor. "Like a basement?" Elias remembered the locked door his grandfather mentioned in passing, down a spiral stair no one used. They left the study, moved through the mansions, dark halls. The air grew colder as they descended a narrow staircase, steps worn smooth by time. At the bottom, a heavy iron door, rusted but solid, with the same spiral symbol carved deep. Elias pushed, but it wouldn't budge. Amara ran her hand along the symbol, and it glowed, faint and blue, like starlight trapped in stone. A click sounded, and the door swung open, slow and heavy. Beyond was a room, vast and dark, its walls covered in carvings. Names, thousands of them, etched in every inch of stone. Some glowed, some faded, some looked fresh as the ones on Elias's step. In the center stood a stone table, and on it a single object, a small black orb, smooth as glass, reflecting no light. Elias stepped, closer, drawn to it. The air hummed low and deep like a heartbeat. Amara grabbed his arm. "Don't touch it," she said. "It feels wrong." But the orb pulsed, and shadows moved again. They poured from the walls, not just shapes but figures, vague and shifting, with eyes like distant stars. They whispered, a chorus of voices, saying names: Elias, Amara, Thaddeus, and more. Names from times long gone. Visions hit Elias. Thaddeus at his telescope, staring into a void where shadows danced. His grandfather, young, finding this room, running in fear. Stars collapsing into darkness, birthing things that hungered. Amara screamed, pulling him back. The shadows lunged, but she grabbed a rusted candelabra from the floor, swung it. The shadows hissed, retreated. "We need to go," she yelled. They ran up the stairs, through the mansion, out into the night. The door slammed shut behind them, locking with a thud. Elias clutched the star chart, stolen from the desk, and Amara held a book she'd grabbed, its pages full of rituals to call or banish the void. Back in town, they sat in Elias's cottage, lantern low, doors barred. The chart showed a path not on earth but in the sky, a constellation that led to the gate. The book spoke of shadows as servants of ancient beings, cosmic horrors that used names to tie souls to their will. "They chose us," Amara said, voice quiet. "But why?" Elias looked at the chart, at their names carved in his floor. "To open the gate, or to stop it." They didn't sleep that night. Shadows lingered outside, scratching at windows, whispering. Elias and Amara made a plan: find the gate, learn its secrets, and fight the shadows before more names were carved, before the void swallowed them all. Chapter 3. Names etched in darkness, Elias sat in his cottage, the lantern's weak glow barely holding back the night. The air smelled of wax and fear, heavy with the memory of the mansion's cold basement and the black orb that pulsed like a heart. Amara sat across from him, her storm-gray eyes fixed on the star chart they'd stolen from the mansion. Its strange lines and unknown stars seemed to mock them, promising answers but giving none. The book she'd grabbed lay open, its pages filled with warnings about shadows that served ancient things, things from beyond the sky. Outside, the wind howled, and every creak of the cottage made Elias jump. The names carved on his floor, Elias, Amara, and now a new one, Cillian, stared up like accusations. "Who's Cillian?" Amara asked, her voice low, as if saying the name might summon something. Her fingers traced the carved letters, rough and fresh. The scratches had appeared just before dawn, after they'd fled the mansion. Elias had no answer. He didn't know. A Cillian. But the name felt heavy, like it carried a story he wasn't ready to hear. "We need to find him," Elias said, rubbing his eyes. Sleep hadn't come for either of them. The shadows outside had scratched at the windows all night, whispering names and voices that weren't human. "If he's like us, marked, he might know something." Amara nodded, but her face was tight, scared. "What if he's not like us? What if he's with them?" Elias didn't want to think about that. The journal, the mansion, the orb, it all pointed to something bigger, something that wanted their names, their souls. His grandfather's words echoed. They carved to bind fates. He stood, grabbed his coat. "We start in town. Someone must know a Cillian." The morning was gray, clouds low and thick, like the sky was pressing down. Eldridge felt different now, its stone houses and narrow streets heavy with secrets. People moved quickly, heads down, as if afraid to look too long at anything. Elias and Amara went to the bakery first, where Mrs. Tully, round and rosy, kneaded dough behind the counter. "Cillian?" she said, wiping flour on her apron. "Only one I know is Cillian Gray, lives out by the old mill. Keeps to himself. Strange fellow. Used to be a teacher, but stopped after, well, something happened." "What happened?" Amara asked, leaning forward. Mrs. Tully's eyes darted to the window, then back. "Heard he saw things at night. Shadows, maybe." Stopped. "Talking much after that." She leaned closer, voice dropping. "Some say he's cursed, like that mansion up the hill." Elias's stomach twisted. He thanked her, bought a loaf to be polite, and they left. The mill was a mile out, past fields of dying grass and twisted trees. The path was muddy, boots sinking with each step. Amara clutched the book, her knuckles white. "This Cillian," she said. "He's like us. Marked. I feel it." The mill came into view, its wheels still, covered in moss. A small house sat beside it, windows boarded, roof sagging. Elias knocked, heart pounding. No answer. He knocked again, louder. A shadow moved behind the boards, and the door creaked open. A man stood there, thin, with graying hair and eyes sunken deep, like he hadn't slept in years. "What do you want?" he asked, voice rough. "Are you Cillian Gray?" Elias asked. The man's eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "I'm Elias. This is Amara. We saw your name. Carved. Like ours." Cillian's face went pale. He stepped back, but didn't close the door. "Inside," he said, voice sharp. "Now!" The house was dark, lit by a single candle. Books and papers were piled everywhere, some with sketches of stars, others with names scribbled over and over. Cillian sat, hands shaking. "When did you see it?" he asked. "Last night," Amara said. "On his floor. Our names were there too." Cillian nodded like he'd expected it. "They started with me a month ago. My name on the mill's wall, then others. People I don't know. I thought I was going mad." He pulled up his sleeve, showed his arm. Carved into his skin, faint but clear, was his name, surrounded by symbols like those in the mansion. "They did this while I slept." Elias felt sick. Amara gasped, hand over her mouth. "What are they?" Elias asked. Cillian leaned forward, candlelight making his face look like a skull. "They're old, older than stars. They live in the dark between, where light can't go. They want something, us maybe. Our names tie us to them. How—" "Do you know?" Amara asked, voice trembling. Cillian stood, grabbed a book from a pile. It was old, leather-cracked, pages brittle. "Found this in the mill's attic." Written by Thaddeus Varn's son, Ezra. He saw what his father did, what he called down. He opened it, read aloud. "The shadows are their hands, reaching from the void. They carve names to mark souls for the gate. When enough names are taken, it opens, and the old ones come through." Elias's blood ran cold. "The gate. We saw it. In the mansion's basement. An orb, black, pulsing." Cillian's eyes widened. "You went there, you fools. That's their anchor. The orb holds their will, lets them touch our world." Amara clutched the star chart. "This shows a path to the gate in the sky. Can we stop it?" Cillian shook his head. "I tried. Burned the carvings, prayed, even left town." "They follow. They always find you." He paused, voice dropping. "But there's a ritual in Ezra's book. To banish them, it needs 3 marked souls." "3?" Elias said, heart sinking. "Us," Cillian nodded. "I didn't know who the others were. Now I do." They sat in silence, the candle flickering. Outside, the wind screamed and scratches sounded on the walls. Elias looked at Cillian's arm, at the names on his floor, and felt trapped, like a bug in a web. "What do we do?" he asked. "We go back," Cillian said. "To the mansion. The ritual starts there, where the orb is. But it's dangerous. The shadows don't want us free." Amara stood, jaw set. "We don't have a choice. They're coming for us." They agreed to return at dusk, when the shadows were strongest. Cillian gave them Ezra's book, its pages heavy with warnings and strange drawings. Elias read as they walked back to town, the words sinking in like stones. The ritual needed blood, words spoken in the old tongue, and the orb's destruction. If they failed, The gate would open, and the Shadow's masters would come. In town, they stopped at the library. Mrs. Harrow was there, sorting books. Elias showed her the book, asked about Ezra Varn. Her face darkened. Ezra tried to undo his father's work. Disappeared, like Thaddeus. Some say the Shadows took him. She paused, looked at them. "You're in deep, aren't you?" Elias nodded, too tired to lie. "We need help. Anything about the Shadows, the gate." Mrs. Harrow sighed, pulled a key from her pocket. "There's a room in the back, locked for years. Your grandfather used it. Might be something there." The room was small, dusty, filled with boxes and old journals. Elias found one in his grandfather's hand, dated 20 years ago. "I saw the gate," it read. "The orb called to me, but I ran. The Shadows know my name, but I won't let them have it." Pages later, a sketch, a spiral symbol, with words, "Blood binds, blood breaks." Amara found a map, not of stars, but of the town, with lines connecting the mansion, the mill, and the library. "It's a triangle," she said, "like they're linked." Elias felt a chill. The Shadows are everywhere. Dusk came too fast. They met Cillian at the mansion's gate, his face grim, a knife in his hand. "For the ritual," he said. "Blood binds." Elias carried Ezra's book, Amara the Star Chart. The mansion seemed darker now, its towers sharper against the purple sky. The door creaked open, as if waiting. Inside, the air was colder, heavier. Shadows moved in corners, watching. They went straight to the basement, the iron door already open. The orb sat on its table, pulsing faster, like it knew they were there. The carved names on the walls glowed brighter, whispering. Cillian opened the book, read the ritual's words. They were strange, sharp, hurting Elias's ears. Amara cut her palm, let blood drip onto the orb. It hissed, steam rising. Elias did the same, his hand shaking. The shadow screamed, loud and awful, swirling around them. Cillian chanted louder, voice breaking. The orb cracked, light spilling out, blinding. The shadows lunged, clawing at them. Elias felt cold, like his soul was being pulled away. Amara grabbed his hand, her blood mixing with his. "Don't let go!" she yelled. The orb shattered, and the shadows wailed, fading. But the carvings glowed brighter, and a new name appeared on the wall. Eldridge. The whole town, marked. They stumbled out, gasping, the mansion shaking behind them. The ritual had worked, but not enough. The gate was still there, somewhere in the sky, and the shadows were angry. Back in the cottage they sat, bloodied and scared. Cillian stared at the floor. "We slowed them," he said, "but they're not gone. The gate's still open somewhere." Elias looked at the star chart, at the new name on his wall. "Eldridge," he whispered. "They want the whole town." Amara's eyes were hard. "Then we fight. We find the gate, and we close it." Chapter 4. Whispers from the stars. The night was heavy, the kind that pressed against the windows of Elias's cottage like it wanted to get in. The lantern flickered, throwing jagged shadows across the walls, where the carved names, Elias, Amara, Cillian, and now Eldridge, glowed faintly, as if mocking them. Elias sat on the floor, his back against the cold stone, the stolen star chart spread before him. Its lines twisted into shapes no astronomer would recognize, stars connected by threads that pulsed like veins. Amara sat across, her face pale, blood still crusted on her palm from the ritual. Cillian stood by the door, knife in hand, eyes darting to every creak of the house. The air smelled of dust and fear, and outside, the wind carried whispers that weren't just wind. "We broke the orb," Amara said, voice shaky but stubborn. "Why are they still coming?" She clutched Ezra Varn's book, its pages worn and heavy with secrets. The ritual had stopped the shadows for a moment, but the name Eldridge carved on the floor meant something bigger, something worse. The whole town was marked now, tied to whatever horror lived in the dark between stars. Elias stared at the chart. "The gate's not here," he said, voice low. "It's up there." He pointed at the ceiling, meaning the sky. The chart shows a path, a constellation. We need to find it. Cillian snorted, his face all sharp angles in the dim light. Find it? And then what? You saw what happened in the mansion. We barely got out. Those things, they're not just shadows. They're alive. Elias didn't argue. He felt it too. The cold that sank into his bones when the shadows touched him, the whispers that knew his name, his fears, his grandfather's journal tucked in his coat, burned against his chest. They carved to bind fates, it said. And now, the fate of Eldridge hung like a storm cloud. We can't stay here, Amara said, standing. Her storm-gray eyes caught the lantern's glow, fierce despite the fear. The shadows know where we are. We need to move, find this gate, and end it. Cillian shook his head. End it? You think we can fight things older than the stars? Ezra tried. He's gone. Your grandfather? Tried, Elias. He's dead. We're just names to them. Elias stood, fists tight. Then why mark us? Why not take us already? They need us for something. We have a chance. Cillian's eyes softened just a bit. Hope's dangerous, boy, but fine. Where do we start? Elias pointed to the chart. The hill behind the mill, its high, clear view of the sky. If the gate's in the stars, we'll see it there. They left the cottage at midnight when the town slept under a moonless sky. The air was cold, biting their faces as they walked, lanterns swinging. The path to the mill was quiet, too quiet, like the world held its breath. The mill's wheel loomed ahead, still and mossy, the house beside it dark. Cillian led them past it, up a steep hill where grass gave way to bare rock. At the top, the sky opened wide, stars sharp and countless, but wrong somehow, like they were watching back. Elias spread the chart on the ground, held it down with stones. Amara knelt beside him, her breath clouding in the cold. Cillian stood watch, knife gleaming. Hurry, he muttered. I hear them. Elias didn't need to ask what. The whispers were there, faint but growing, like voices carried on the wind. Not words, but names. Hundreds, thousands, from places and times he couldn't know. He traced the chart forest system. The rest of this message has been cut off. Based on the context, it seems you wanted me to continue writing chapter 4 of the story, The Shadows That Carve Names, to a length of approximately 5,000 words. Since the message was interrupted, I'll proceed with that request, continuing the story in the same style and tone as the previous chapters, using simple, human-like language suitable for a grade 8 level, and maintaining the Gothic and cosmic atmosphere. The chapter will build on the events of Chapter 3, focusing on the character's attempt to locate the cosmic gate in the stars, with vivid sensory details, slow building tension, character development, and a cliffhanger ending. I'll avoid AI-sounding words and keep the narrative engaging to evoke a wonderful response from readers. Chapter 4. Whispers from the stars. Elias shivered as he spread the star chart on the rocky ground, the cold night air biting his fingers. The sky above the hill behind the mill was a sea of stars, sharp and bright, but they didn't feel beautiful tonight. They felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on him. Amara and Cillian. The whispers followed them up the hill, soft and sharp, like the rustle of dead leaves. Names, endless names, swirling in the dark. Elias's lantern flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. The memory of the mansion's basement, the pulsing black orb, the glowing names carved in stone, clung to his mind like damp moss. Amara knelt beside him, her dark hair catching the starlight, her face pale and tight with worry. Cillian stood, a few steps away, his knife glinting like a small star, his eyes scanning the darkness for threats. We need to find the gate, Elias said, his voice low, almost lost in the wind. The star chart's strange lines twisted like the vines on the mansion, pointing to a constellation that wasn't in any book he'd read. It's up there, somewhere, the key to stopping them. Amara's storm-gray eyes met his, fierce but scared. How do we find a gate in the sky? Cillian's voice cut through the chill. We follow the ritual. Ezra's book said 3 marked souls. blood and words to break the anchor. We broke the orb, but the gate's still open. We need to close it. The hill was high, the town of Eldridge a faint glow far below. The mill's broken wheel stood silent, a dark shape against the starry sky. Elias's grandfather's journal was tucked in his coat, its warnings burning. The shadows bind fates with names. The new name on his floor, Eldridge, meant the whole town was in danger. They had to act fast. They'd come to the hill at midnight when the stars were sharpest. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and every sound, every snap of a twig, every gust, made Elias's heart jump. The shadows weren't just shadows anymore. They were alive, hungry, whispering things he couldn't understand, but felt in his bones. Elias traced the chart's lines with a cold finger. "This constellation," he said, pointing at a cluster of stars. "It's not right, not like any I know, but it's the path to the gate." Amara frowned, her breath puffing white in the cold. "How do we reach it? It's in the sky." Cillian shifted, his boots crunching gravel. "The ritual doesn't need us to go up there. It needs us to call the gate down. Blood and words, that's what Ezra wrote." Elias nodded, his stomach tight. The ritual in Ezra's book was their only hope. 3 marked souls, their blood mixed, and ancient words spoken to shatter the gate's power. They'd destroyed the orb, but the shadows kept coming, stronger now, angrier. The name Eldridge carved on his floor meant time was short. "Let's do it here," Elias said. "The chart points to this spot. The stars are clear tonight." Amara touched his arm, her hand warm through his sleeve. "You sure? This place feels wrong." She was right. The hill felt heavy, like the air itself was watching. But they had no choice. The shadows had marked them, and now the whole town. Elias pulled out Ezra's book, its leather cover rough against his palms. "We start with the words," he said, flipping to the ritual page. The strange symbols looked like the carvings, sharp and twisted. Cillian stepped closer, his knife. "Ready?" "Blood first," he said, his voice rough like the rocks around them. He cut his palm, a quick slash, and held it over the chart. Dark drops fell, soaking into the paper, making the stars look alive. Amara followed, her blood mixing with his, the smell sharp and metallic. Elias hesitated, his hand trembling, then sliced his own palm. The pain stung, but he pressed his hand to the chart, their blood pooling in the center of the constellation. Cillian began the chant, his voice low and shaky, reading words that sounded like wind through broken glass. "Que vadis, umbre noctis, ad nihilum vos voco." The air grew colder, the whispers louder, circling them like wolves. Elias's heart pounded, his blood sticky on his hand. The stars above seemed to flicker, not like stars should. Amara grabbed his other hand, squeezing. "Hard." "It's working," she whispered, her eyes wide. The chart glowed faintly, the bloodlines tracing the constellation's shape. The whispers grew into voices, calling their names, Elias, Amara, Cillian, and others, too many to count. Shadows moved at the edge of the lantern's light, long and thin, with eyes like distant stars. "Keep going," Elias shouted, his voice cracking. The ground trembled, a low rumble like a sleeping beast waking. Cillian's chant grew louder, the words cutting the air. "Per sanguinem nostrum, frangimus vincula." The stars above shifted, forming the chart's pattern, a door of light in the sky. The shadows lunged, their cold touch like ice on Elias's skin. He yanked Amara back, swinging his lantern like a club. The shadows hissed, scattering, but they didn't leave. They circled, whispering, waiting. Elias's mind flashed with visions, dark voids, stars dying, things with no shape reaching through. He shook them off, focused on Cillian's voice. The sky cracked open, a sliver of light spilling down, blue and sharp like a blade. The gate was here, not up there, but right in front of them. The chart burned, blood sizzling, and the air screamed, a sound like tearing metal. Amara clung to him, her breath fast and warm against his neck. Cillian's knife dropped, his hands shaking. As he shouted the final words, "Claudite portus aeternum." The light exploded, blinding, and the shadows wailed, a horrible noise that clawed at Elias's ears. The gate flickered, a shimmering tear in the sky, then snapped shut. The whispers stopped, the air still. The chart was ash, curling in the May wind. They fell to their knees, panting, blood dripping onto the rocks. The stars were normal again, cold and distant. But the hill still felt wrong, like it remembered what happened. Back at the cottage, they sat in silence, the lantern low. The names on the floor were dim, but not gone. "Did we do it?" Amara asked, her voice small. Cillian stared at the wall, where a new carving had appeared, a spiral, sharp and deep, with no name. "The gate's closed," he said, "but they're still out there, watching." Elias's heart sank. The shadows were quiet, but not gone. The spiral meant something new was coming, something worse. "We need to warn the town," he said, his voice heavy. "Eldridge isn't safe yet." Chapter 5. The hidden library of fate's Elias's cottage felt like a trap, its walls closing in under the weight of the night. The lantern's dim glow flickered, casting shadows that seemed to twitch with a life of their own. The carved names, Elias, Amara, Cillian, and Eldridge, stared up from the floor, their faint glow a reminder of the shadow's reach. The new spiral carving on the wall pulsed softly, like a heartbeat from somewhere far away. Elias's hand still stung from the ritual on the hill, where their blood had burned the star chart and closed the gate in the sky. But the quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was the calm before a storm. The air smelled of wax and fear, and outside, the wind carried whispers that weren't human. Amara sat on the floor, her storm-gray eyes fixed on Ezra Varn's book, its pages open to a sketch of the spiral symbol. Her dark hair fell over her face, hiding the worry etched there. "We closed the gate," she said, voice soft but sharp. "Why are they still here?" Cillian leaned against the door, his knife tucked into his belt, his face all hard lines and shadows. "We didn't end them," he said. "We just made them mad. That spiral, it's a warning. They're planning something bigger." Elias clutched his grandfather's journal, its leather warm against his cold fingers. The words inside haunted him. The shadows bind fates with names. The spiral wasn't in the journal, but it felt like a key, a clue to something deeper. "Mrs. Harrow mentioned a locked room in the library," he said, standing. "She said my grandfather used it. There. Might be answers there." Amara looked up, her eyes bright with hope and fear. "A room? What kind?" "She didn't say," Elias admitted. "But she gave me the key. If my grandfather hid something, it's our best shot." Cillian snorted, his graying hair catching the lantern's light. "You think a room's gonna save us? Those things are older than this town, older than time. They don't stop." "We don't stop either," Amara snapped, standing. Her hands were fists, her cut palm crusted with blood. "We're marked, Cillian. Running won't help. We fight or we lose everything." Cillian's eyes softened. "Just a bit. Fine, but we stick together. No splitting up." They left the cottage at dawn, when the sky was gray and heavy like wet stone. Eldridge was quiet, its streets empty, houses shuttered tight. The library stood at the town's edge, a squat building of old brick, its windows like half-closed. Eyes. Mrs. Harrow was inside, sorting books, her bent frame moving slow but sure. She looked up when they entered, her sharp eyes narrowing. "You're back," she said. "Found trouble, didn't you?" Elias nodded, holding up the key. "The room. Where is it?" Mrs. Harrow pointed to a door at the back, half hidden by shelves. "Be careful," she said, voice low. "Your grandfather locked that room for a reason. Said it held things best left alone." The door was heavy oak, carved with faint spirals that made Elias's stomach twist. The key turned with a click, and the door groaned open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. The air smelled of dust and old paper, with a sharp tang, like metal or blood. Elias led the way, lantern high, its light barely reaching the stone walls. Amara followed, clutching Ezra's book, and Cillian brought up the rear, his knife out, ready. At the bottom was a room, vast and cold, its walls lined with shelves that stretched into shadows. Books and scrolls filled every space, their covers worn, some glowing faintly like the carvings. In the center stood a stone table, carved with the same spiral symbol, and on it a single book, black, no title, just a spiral etched deep. The air hummed, low and deep, like a distant drum. "This isn't just a room," Amara whispered, her voice echoing. "It's alive." Elias felt it too. The room watched them, its air heavy with secrets. He stepped to the table, touched the black book. It was cold, like touching a frozen lake. He opened it, and the pages were filled with names, thousands of them, written in ink that shimmered like starlight. Some were crossed out, others glowed, and at the bottom of one page, fresh as if just written, were their names: Elias, Amara, Cillian. Cillian cursed, backing away. "This is their place. The Shadows' library. They keep the names here." Amara flipped through Ezra's book, her hands shaking. "It says, the Library of Fates holds the names of every soul they've marked. If we destroy it, we break their power." Elias's heart raced. Destroy it? How? Before anyone could answer, the room shook, a low rumble like the earth groaning. The shelves rattled, books falling, and the spiral on the table glowed, bright and blue, like a star trapped in stone. Shadows poured from the walls, not just shapes, but figures, tall and thin, with eyes like burning stars. They whispered, a chorus of names, loud and sharp, filling the room with sound. "Run!" Cillian shouted, but the shadows were fast, curling around their legs like smoke. Elias swung his lantern and the shadows hissed, pulling back, but they didn't leave. Amara grabbed the black book, stuffed it into her coat. "We can't fight here," she said, voice tight. "We need to study it, find the ritual." They ran up the stairs, the shadows chasing, their whispers turning to screams. The door slammed shut behind them, locking with a thud. Mrs. Harrow was gone, the library empty, its lights dim. Outside, the sky was darker, clouds swirling like a storm, waiting to break. Back in the cottage, they spread the black book on the floor. Its pages were heavy, the names written in languages they didn't know, some in symbols that hurt to look at. Elias found a page with his grandfather's name, crossed out, and his heart sank. "He was here," he said, voice breaking. "He fought them." Amara's eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. "We'll finish what he started." She turned to a page with a ritual, different from the one in Ezra's book. It spoke of fire, not blood, to burn the names and free the souls. "We need to burn this book," she said, "but it says the fire has to come from the stars." Cillian frowned. "Starfire? What's that?" Elias remembered something from his grandfather's journal. A story about a meteor that fell near Eldridge years ago in a field by the mill. "There's a stone," he said. Grandfather wrote about it. Said it glowed, like it held light from the sky. They set out at dusk, the town quiet, the air thick with the smell of coming rain. The field was overgrown, thorns snagging their clothes. The meteor stone was there, half buried, glowing faintly under the darkening sky. It was warm, humming softly, like the orb in the mansion. Elias touched it, and visions hit him. Stars falling, shadows rising, names carved across worlds. He pulled back, gasping. "This is it," he said. "We use this to burn the book." They built a fire around the stone, its glow feeding the flames until they burned blue like the spiral's light. Amara held the book, hesitating. "If we do this, we might anger them more," she said. "We're already marked," Cillian said, his voice hard. "No going back." She tossed the book into the fire. The flames roared, blue and hot, and the book screamed, a sound like 1,000 voices crying out. The shadows came, fast and angry, swirling around the field. Elias grabbed Amara's hand. Cillian raised his knife, and they stood together as the fire burned higher. the names turning to ash. The ground shook, the sky cracked, and a light spilled down, not from the stars, but from somewhere deeper, darker. The shadows wailed, fading, but not all. One stayed, tall and sharp, with eyes like dying stars. It pointed at them, and a new name carved itself into the meteor stone. Vera. They stumbled back to the cottage, the fire still burning behind them. The book was gone, but the spiral on the wall glowed brighter, and the name Vera appeared beside it. Elias's heart pounded. "Who's Vera?" he asked, voice shaking. Amara's face was pale. "My sister," she whispered. "She died in the fire that took my family, but she's gone. How can they mark her?" Cillian's eyes were dark. "They don't just mark the living." Chapter 6. Eldritch Bonds. Awaken, the cottage was a cage, its walls heavy with the weight of carved names. Elias, Amara, Cillian, Eldridge, and now Vera, Amara's dead sister, glowing faintly on the floor. The spiral carving on the wall pulsed like a heartbeat, its blue light cold and sharp, like a star trapped in stone. Elias sat by the lantern, its dim glow flickering, making shadows dance like they were alive. The air smelled of ash and fear, the memory of the burning book in the field clinging to their clothes. Amara clutched the locket they'd found in the hidden library, her sister's face staring back from the faded photo inside. Her storm-gray eyes were wet, her hands shaking. Cillian stood by the window, knife in hand, watching the dark outside, where whispers scratched like nails on glass. "Vera's gone," Amara said, her voice small, breaking. "She died years ago. How can they mark her?" Elias's throat was tight. His grandfather's journal, tucked in his coat, felt heavier than ever. "The shadows bind fates with names," it said, but nothing about the dead, the burning of the black. Book, the Library of Fates, had weakened the shadows, but not stopped them. The new name, Vera, meant something worse was coming, something tied to Amara's past. Cillian turned, his face hard, eyes sunken. "They don't care if she's dead. They mark souls, not bodies. Your sister's tied to this, same as us." Elias stood, his cut palm stinging. "We need to know why. The library had answers. Maybe there's more. Something we missed." Amara's head snapped up, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "You want to go back? After what happened? The shadows nearly took us." "We can't stay here," Elias said, pointing at the spiral. "That thing's alive. They're still coming. We need to understand what they want with Vera, with Eldridge, with us." Cillian nodded, slow and grim. "The library's our only lead, but we go prepared. No more running blind." They waited until dawn, when the shadows seemed quieter, though the whispers never stopped. The town of Eldridge was silent, its stone houses shuttered, the streets empty under a gray sky heavy with clouds. The library loomed at the edge of town, its brick walls old and cracked, windows like eyes half closed. Mrs. Harrow wasn't there. The desk empty, books scattered like someone left in a hurry. Elias's stomach twisted. "Where is she?" he muttered. Amara clutched the locket, her knuckles white. Maybe she knows too much. Maybe they took her. They moved to the back, to the oak door with its faint spiral carvings. The key still worked, the lock clicking open with a sound like a bone snapping. The staircase spiraled down, dark and cold, the air thick with dust and a sharp smell, like blood or rust. Elias's lantern barely lit the stone walls, shadows clinging to the edges. Amara followed close, her breath quick, and Cillian stayed at the rear, knife ready, his boots heavy on the steps. The hidden library was the same, but different. The shelves stretched into darkness, books glowing faintly, their spines cracked and old. The stone table in the center was bare now, the black book gone, but the spiral carving glowed brighter, pulsing like a wound. The air hummed, low and deep, like a voice too big to hear. "This place feels worse," Amara whispered, her voice echoing, "like it's waiting." Elias nodded, his skin prickling. He moved to a shelf, pulled a book at random. Its pages were filled with sketches of stars, not like the ones in the sky, but twisted, pulsing, connected by lines that looked like veins. Words in an unknown language curled around them, sharp and painful to read. "This is about the shadows," he said, voice low. "They're not just from the void. They serve something bigger." Cillian grabbed another book, its cover leather and cold. He flipped it open, revealing a drawing of a figure, tall and thin, with no face, just eyes like burning stars. "This is them," he said, voice rough. "They're masters, the old ones." Amara's hand went to the locket. "Vera saw something before the fire. She told me once about shadows in her room, whispering her name. I thought she was dreaming." Elias's heart sank. She was marked even then. They searched the shelves, pulling books, scrolls, anything that might explain the spiral, the names, Vera. One scroll, brittle and yellow, caught Elias's eye. It was written in his grandfather's hand, dated a year before he died. "The Library of Fates is their heart," it read. "They store names here, binding souls to the old ones. The spiral is their mark, a bond across worlds. I burned one book, but there are more. Vera's name was here years ago. She's not free." Elias read aloud, his voice shaking. Amara gasped, clutching the locket tighter. "She was here? In this room?" Cillian's eyes darkened. "The shadows don't let go. They marked her, and now they're using her to get to us." The room shook, a low rumble like the earth waking. The spiral on the table glowed brighter, and shadows poured from the walls, not just shapes, but figures, tall and thin, with eyes. Like stars. They whispered, a chorus of names: Elias, Amara, Cillian, Vera, and more. 1,000 voices from worlds far away. The air grew cold, heavy, pressing on their chests. "Get back!" Elias shouted, swinging his lantern. The shadows hissed, pulling away, but they didn't leave. They circled, their eyes burning, their whispers turning to screams. Amara grabbed a book from the table, its pages glowing, and stuffed it into her coat. "We need this," she said, voice tight. "It's got the spiral's secret." Cillian slashed at a shadow, his knife passing through like smoke. "Run!" he yelled, pushing them toward the stairs. The shadows lunged, their touch cold as ice, clawing at Elias's arms. He felt a pull, like his soul was being tugged away, visions flashing, dark voids, stars collapsing, things with no shape reaching through. They stumbled up the stairs, the shadows chasing, their screams echoing. The door slammed shut behind them, locking with a thud. The library was empty, the air still, but the whispers followed, seeping through the walls. Outside, the sky was darker, clouds swirling like a storm about to break. Back in the cottage, they opened the stolen book. Its pages were heavy, written in ink that shimmered like starlight, filled with drawings of the spiral and words in the old tongue. One page showed a ritual, not with blood or fire, but with light from the marked souls, channeled through the spiral. "It says we can break the bond," Amara said, her voice shaking. "But we need Vera's soul. She's part of it." Elias's heart pounded. "How do we find a soul?" Cillian's face was grim. "The mill. That's where it started for me. The shadows were strongest there. If Vera's tied to them, that's where she'll be." They set out at dusk, the town quiet, the air thick with the smell of rain. The mill loomed ahead, its wheels still, covered in moss, the house beside it dark. The field where they'd burned the book was scorched, the meteor stone glowing faintly. Amara clutched the locket, her eyes wet but hard. "She's here," she whispered. "I feel her." They entered the mill, its air cold and damp, smelling of rot and rust. The floor creaked, and shadows moved in corners, watching. In the attic, where Cillian had found Ezra's book, they found a mirror, old and cracked, its frame carved with spirals. Amara touched it, and the glass glowed, showing not their reflections but a girl, pale, with Amara's eyes, her face scared but familiar. "Vera," Amara gasped, tears falling. The girl's lips moved, but no sound came. The shadows swirled. Around the mirror, their whispers loud, calling Vera's name. Elias opened the stolen book, found the ritual. "We need to speak her name, all of us, and use the light." He cut his palm again, blood dripping onto the mirror. Amara and Cillian did the same, their blood mixing, the glass glowing brighter. They chanted, their voices shaky. "Vera, soul of light, break the bond of night." The mirror cracked, light spilling out, blue and sharp like the spiral's glow. The shadows screamed, a horrible noise, and Vera's image reached out, her hand breaking through the glass. Amara grabbed it, crying, and the room shook, the shadows fading, but not all. One stayed, tall and dark, its eyes like dying stars. It pointed, and a new name carved itself into the floor. Harrow. They stumbled out, the mill shaking behind them. Vera's image was gone, but Amara held the locket tighter, her face wet. "She's free," she whispered, but her voice was unsure. Back in the cottage, the spiral pulsed, and Harrow glowed beside it. Elias's heart sank. "Mrs. Harrow," he said. "They've marked her now." Cillian's knife gleamed. "They're not done. They're coming for everyone." Chapter 7. Carved Paths of Doom. The air in Elias's cottage was thick, heavy with the smell of damp wood and fear. The lantern's weak light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to twist and crawl across the walls. The names carved on the floor, Elias, Amara, Cillian, Eldridge, Vera, and now Harrow, glowed faintly, their edges sharp like fresh wounds. The spiral carving on the wall pulsed with a cold, blue light, like a star trapped in stone, its rhythm slow and steady, like a heartbeat from somewhere far away. Elias sat on the floor, his hands shaking, the cut on his palm still stinging from the ritual in the mill. Amara clutched her sister's locket, her storm-gray eyes red from crying, though her jaw was set, determined. Cillian stood by the door, his knife glinting, his face hard, eyes scanning the dark outside where whispers scratched at the windows like claws. "Mrs. Harrow," Elias said, his voice low, barely above the wind's howl. "They marked her." "Why?" Amara's fingers tightened on the locket, the photo of Vera inside seeming to watch them. "She knew something," she said, voice shaky but fierce. "She warned us about the library, gave us the key. Maybe she's been fighting them too." Cillian snorted, his graying hair catching the lantern's glow. "Or she's part of it. You saw the library, the books, the names. She's been there, all along, keeping secrets." Elias's stomach twisted. Mrs. Harrow's sharp eyes, her quiet warnings, the way she'd vanished from the library, it all felt wrong now. His grandfather's journal, tucked in his coat, weighed heavy, its words echoing, "The shadows bind fates with names." The new name, Harrow, meant the shadows were closing in, their reach spreading like a stain across Eldridge. "We need to find her," Elias said, standing. "If she's marked, she's in danger. If she's with them, we need to know." Amara nodded, her face pale but set. "The library's her place. If she's anywhere, it's there." Cillian's eyes darkened. "Back to that cursed room, after what we saw. The shadows nearly took us last time." "We don't have a choice," Elias said, his voice firm despite the fear clawing his chest. "The spiral, the names, Vera, it's all connected. Mrs. Harrow might be the key." They waited until dawn, when the whispers quieted, though they never stopped completely. The town was silent, its stone houses shuttered, the streets empty under a sky heavy with gray clouds. The library stood at the edge of Eldridge, its brick walls cracked, windows dark like closed eyes. The door was unlocked, creaking open at Elias's touch, and the air inside smelled of dust and old paper, with a sharp tang, like blood or rust. The main room was empty, books scattered on tables, chairs tipped over like someone left in a hurry. "Mrs. Harrow?" Elias called, his voice echoing, no answer. Amara clutched the locket, her breath quick, and Cillian gripped his knife, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. They moved to the back, to the oak door with its faint spiral carvings. The key turned with a click, and the staircase spiraled down, into darkness. Colder than before, the air thick with that metallic smell. Elias's lantern barely lit the stone walls, shadows clinging to the edges, watching. Amara followed close, her hand brushing his arm, and Cillian stayed at the rear, muttering curses under his breath. The hidden library was different now. The shelves stretched into darkness, books glowing faintly, their spines cracked and old. The stone table in the center was bare, the spiral carving glowing brighter, its blue light pulsing faster, like a warning. The air hummed, low and deep, like a voice too big to hear, and the walls seemed to breathe. The carved names, thousands of them, shimmering like stars. "This place is alive," Amara whispered, her voice trembling. "It's their heart." Like the scroll said. Elias nodded, his skin prickling. He moved to a shelf, pulled a book with a spiral on its cover. Its pages were filled with drawings of paths, lines twisting through stars, across worlds, leading to a gate that shimmered, like the one they'd seen in the sky. Words in an unknown language curled around them, sharp and painful to read. "These are paths," he said, voice low. "The shadows use them to move, to carve names." Cillian grabbed a scroll, its edges crumbling. It showed a figure, tall and thin with no face, just eyes like burning stars, standing over a town, Eldridge. "This is their plan," he said, voice rough. "They mark the town, bind it, then open the gate for their masters." Amara's hand went to the locket, her eyes wet. "Vera's name was here, now Harrow. They're tying us all together." Elias's heart sank. He found a journal, not his grandfather's, but Mrs. Harrow's, hidden behind a shelf. Its pages were filled with her neat handwriting, dated years back. "I saw the shadows when I was young," it read. "They marked my brother, took him. I locked the library to keep them out, but they always find a way. The spiral is their door, their bond." Elias's grandfather knew, tried to stop them. "I helped, but we failed." Elias read aloud, his voice shaking. Amara gasped, clutching the locket tighter. "She fought them," she said. "She's not with them." Cillian's eyes narrowed. "Then where is she?" The room shook, a low rumble like the earth groaning. The spiral on the table glowed brighter, and shadows poured from the walls. Not just shapes, but figures, tall and thin, with eyes like stars. They whispered, a chorus of names: Elias, Amara, Cillian, Vera, Harrow, and more. 1,000 voices from worlds far away. The air grew cold, heavy, pressing on their chests. "Get back!" Elias shouted, swinging his lantern. The shadows hissed, pulling away, but they didn't leave. They circled, their eyes burning, their whispers turning to screams. Amara grabbed a book from the table, its pages glowing, and stuffed it into her coat. "We need this," she said, voice tight. "It's got the paths." Cillian slashed at a shadow, his knife passing through like smoke. "Run!" he yelled, pushing them toward the stairs. The shadows lunged, their touch cold as ice, clawing at Elias's arms. He felt a pull, like his soul was being tugged away. Visions flashing, dark voids, stars collapsing, things with no shape reaching through. They stumbled up the stairs, the shadows chasing, their screams echoing. The door slammed shut behind them, locking with a thud. The library was empty, but a trail of papers led to the back door, out into the alley. They followed, finding Mrs. Harrow's scarf torn and stained with blood lying in the mud. "She's out there," Elias said, heart pounding. "We need to find her." They followed the trail, through alleys and fields, to the edge of town where the old church stood, its steeple broken, windows boarded. The air was thick, the whispers louder, calling Harrow's name. Inside, the church was dark, pews overturned, the altar covered in dust. Mrs. Harrow sat there, her face pale, eyes wide, a knife in her hand, blood dripping from a cut on her arm. Her name was carved into the altar, glowing faintly. "You shouldn't have come," she said, voice breaking. "They have me now." Amara stepped forward, clutching the locket. "We can save you, like we saved Vera." Mrs. Harrow shook her head, tears falling. Vera's not free. She's with them, in the paths. The shadows use the dead to open the gate. Elias's heart sank. He opened the stolen book, found a new ritual, one that spoke of cutting the paths, breaking the bonds. With light and will, we can stop them, he said. But we need you. Mrs. Harrow's eyes softened. You're like your grandfather, she said. Stubborn, brave, foolish. She stood swaying and handed them a small stone, carved with a spiral, glowing, faintly. This is their anchor now. Destroy it, and you might cut the paths. They moved to the altar where the ritual began. Mrs. Harrow chanted, her voice weak but steady, words in the old tongue. Per voluntatem nostrum, frangimus vius. Elias and Amara cut their palms, their blood mixing with hers, dripping onto the stone. Cillian stood guard, knife ready, as shadows poured from the walls, their eyes like dying stars. The stone glowed, hot and bright, and the shadows screamed, a horrible noise that clawed at their ears. The church shook, the altar cracking, and the stone shattered, light spilling out, blue and sharp. The shadows faded, but not all. One stayed, tall and dark, its eyes burning. It pointed, and a new name carved itself into the wall. Thaddeus. They stumbled out, the church shaking behind them. Mrs. Harrow collapsed, her breath shallow, but alive. They carried her to the cottage, the spiral on the wall pulsing brighter. Thaddeus, glowing beside it. Elias's heart pounded. Thaddeus. Varn, he said. The astronomer. He's dead, but they're bringing him back. Amara's face was pale. They're using the dead to finish what they started. Cillian's knife gleamed. Then we find where the paths lead, and we end. This. Chapter 8. Shadows beyond the sky. Elias's cottage was a prison of flickering shadows, the lantern's weak glow barely holding back the dark. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood, blood, and fear. The walls scarred with carved names. Elias, Amara, Cillian, Eldridge, Vera, Harrow, and now Thaddeus, glowing faintly like dying embers. The spiral carving pulsed with cold blue light, its rhythm fast and unsteady, like a heart racing in panic. Elias sat on the floor, his hands trembling, the cut on his palm raw from the ritual in the church. Amara clutched her sister's locket, her storm-gray eyes wide with worry, her face pale under the weight of what they'd learned. Cillian leaned against the door, his knife glinting, his sunken eyes scanning the night outside, where whispers scratched like claws on glass. Mrs. Harrow sat in a chair, wrapped in a blanket, her face gray, her arm bandaged from the blood she'd given to shatter the spiral stone. Thaddeus Varn, Elias said, his voice low, almost lost in the wind's howl. He's been dead for years. How can they mark him? Amara's fingers tightened on the locket, the photo of Vera inside a ghostly reminder. They marked Vera, and she's gone. They don't care about life or death. They want souls. Cillian's face was hard, his graying hair catching the lantern's light. Thaddeus started this, built the mansion, called the shadows down. Maybe they're using him to finish it. Elias's stomach twisted, his grandfather's journal, heavy in his coat, burned with warnings. The shadows bind fates with names. The name Thaddeus carved fresh on the wall meant the shadows were reaching deeper, pulling the past into the present. Mrs. Harrow's journal, found in the church, had confirmed it. Thaddeus had stared into the void, invited the shadows, and paid the price. Now his name was back, tied to the gate they'd tried to close. We need to go back to the mansion, Elias said, standing. Thaddeus's telescope is there in the hidden room. It's what he used to see the shadows. Maybe it shows us where the paths lead. Amara's eyes flashed, scared but fierce. The mansion? After everything? The shadows are stronger there. We don't have a choice, Elias said, his voice firm despite the fear clawing his chest. The paths, the gate, it's all tied to Thaddeus. We need to know what he saw. Mrs. Harrow coughed, her voice weak. Be careful, the telescope. It's not just glass, it's their window. Thaddeus looked too long and it broke him. Cillian snorted, his knife twirling in his hand. Broke him? It's breaking us too. But fine, let's end this. They waited until dawn, when the whispers quieted, though they never stopped. Eldridge was a ghost town, its stone houses shuttered, streets empty under a sky heavy with clouds. The mansion loomed on the hill, its Gothic towers sharp against the gray, vines choking its walls like fingers. The door creaked open at Elias's touch, the air inside cold and stale, smelling of dust and old secrets. Furniture lay draped in sheets, like ghosts waiting to rise, and the floorboards groaned under their steps. They moved through the dark halls, lanterns high, shadows twitching in corners. The hidden room was in the west tower, behind a wall Thaddeus's journal had described. Elias found the trigger, a loose stone carved with a spiral, and the wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling up. The air grew colder, sharper, like breathing in a storm. At the top was a circular room, its walls covered in star charts, equations, and names carved in frantic, uneven lines. In the center stood the telescope, huge and black, its lens pointed at a boarded window. "This is it," Elias said, his voice echoing. The telescope was cold, its metal heavy with age, the spiral symbol etched into its base. He touched it, and a chill ran through him, like touching ice that burned. Visions flashed, stars twisting, voids opening, shadows with eyes like dying suns. Amara stepped closer, her locket glinting. "Can we use it to see the paths?" Mrs. Harrow, leaning on Cillian, shook her head. "It's dangerous." Thaddeus saw too much. It called them. "We're already marked," Cillian said, his voice rough. "Might as well look." Elias adjusted the telescope, prying the boards from the window. The sky was gray, but stars peeked through, sharp and wrong. Like they were watching, he looked through the lens, and the world shifted. The stars weren't stars, they were eyes, countless, blinking in a vast black sea. Paths of light twisted between them, like the lines on the star chart, leading to a gate that pulsed with blue light, the same as the spiral. Shadows moved along the paths, carrying names, whispering them in voices that hurt his ears. "Elias!" Amara's voice snapped him back. He stumbled away, heart pounding, the telescope humming like it was alive. "What did you see?" "The paths," he said, voice shaking. "They're real. They lead to the gate, and the shadows are moving on them. They're bringing Thaddeus's soul." Cillian cursed, his knife tight in his hand. "Then we break." The telescope stopped their window. Before they could move, the room shook, a low rumble like the earth waking. The spiral on the telescope glowed, bright and blue, and shadows poured from the walls. Not just shapes, but figures, tall and thin, with eyes like stars. They whispered, a chorus of names: Elias, Amara, Cillian, Vera, Harrow, Thaddeus, and more. 1,000 voices from worlds far away. The air grew cold, heavy, pressing on their chests. "Get back!" Elias shouted, swinging his lantern. The shadows hissed, pulling away, but they didn't leave. They circled, their eyes burning, their whispers turning to screams. Amara grabbed a star chart from the wall, its lines glowing, and stuffed it into her coat. "We need this," she said, voice tight. "It shows the paths." Cillian slashed. At a shadow, his knife passing through like smoke. "Run!" he yelled, pushing Mrs. Harrow toward the stairs. The shadows lunged, their touch cold as ice, clawing at Elias's arms. He felt a pull, like his soul was being tugged away, visions flashing, dark voids, stars collapsing, things with no shape reaching through. They stumbled down the stairs, the shadows chasing, their screams echoing. The wall slid shut behind them, locking with a thud. The mansion shook, dust falling from the ceiling, and they ran outside, the air cold and sharp with coming rain. Mrs. Harrow collapsed, gasping, but alive. Back in the cottage, they spread the star chart on the floor. Its lines pulsed, like the paths Elias had seen, leading to a gate in the sky. Amara opened Thaddeus's journal, found a ritual, different from the others, one that spoke of closing the paths with light from the marked souls. "We need to use the telescope," she said, voice shaking. "But not here. Somewhere open, Where the stars are clear. Cillian's eyes darkened. The hill behind the mill. It's where we closed the gate before. They set out at dusk. The town quiet. The air thick with the smell of rain. The hill was bare, its rocks sharp under their boots. The sky above dark with clouds but pierced by stars. The telescope was heavy, carried between them, its metal cold and humming. They set it up, pointing at the sky, the lens catching the starlight like a mirror. Elias looked through it again, the paths clearer now, twisting through the void, shadows moving fast, carrying Thaddeus's name. Amara chanted the ritual, her voice steady despite the fear. Per lumen nostrum, claudimus vius. Cillian and Elias cut their palms, their blood dripping onto the telescope's lens, glowing blue like the spiral. Mrs. Harrow joined, her voice weak but sure, her blood mixing with theirs. The sky cracked, a sliver of light spilling down, blue and sharp like a blade. The paths shimmered, then snapped, the shadows screaming, a horrible noise that clawed at their ears. The telescope shook, its lens cracking, light spilling out, blinding. The shadows faded, but not all. One stayed, tall and dark, its eyes like dying stars. It pointed, and a new name carved itself into the ground. Astrum. They stumbled back to the cottage, the telescope left behind, its lens shattered. The spiral on the wall pulsed brighter, Astrum glowing beside it. Elias's heart pounded. Astrum, he said. It's not a name. It's a star. Amara's face was pale. They're not just marking people. They're marking the sky. Cillian's knife gleamed. Then we find that star, and we stop them. Chapter 9. Nightmares in Stone Halls. The air in Elias's cottage hung heavy, thick with the smell of wax, blood, and the sharp tang of fear. The lantern's dim light flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to writhe across the walls where the carved names, Elias, Amara, Cillian, Eldridge, Vera, Harrow, and now Astrum, glowed faintly, like embers in a dying fire. The spiral carving pulsed with a cold, blue light, its rhythm fast and uneven, like a heart about to burst. Elias sat on the floor, his hands trembling, the cut on his palm raw and stinging from the ritual on the hill. Amara clutched her sister's locket, her storm-gray eyes wide with worry, her face pale under the weight of their discovery. Cillian stood by the door, his knife glinting in the dim light, his sunken eyes scanning the darkness outside, where whispers scratched like nails on glass. Mrs. Harrow sat slumped in a chair, her bandaged arm trembling, her face gray with exhaustion, from the church ritual that had shattered the spiral stone but brought a new name. Astrum. Astrum, Elias said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the wind howling outside. It's not a person, it's a star. They're marking the sky. Now, Amara's fingers tightened on the locket, the photo of Vera inside a haunting reminder of the shadow's reach. They've got Vera, Harrow, and now a star. What do they want with it? Cillian's face was hard, his graying hair catching the lantern's glow. They're building something. The paths we saw in the telescope, they lead to Astrum. It's their anchor, their gate. Elias's stomach twisted. His grandfather's journal, heavy in his coat, burned with warnings. The shadows bind fates, with names. The name Astrum, carved fresh on the wall, meant the shadows were reaching beyond Eldridge, beyond the earth, into the cosmos itself. Mrs. Harrow's journal had hinted at it. Thaddeus Varn had stared into the void, called the shadows, and tied his soul to a star. Now, that star was marked, and the shadows were using it to pull something terrible through. We need to go back to the mansion, Elias said, standing, his voice firm despite the fear clawing his chest. Thaddeus's notes, his telescope, there's more there. Something about Astrum. Amara's eyes flashed, scared but fierce. The mansion again. The shadows are strongest there. We barely got out last time. We don't have a choice, Elias said, his heart pounding. The telescope showed the paths. If Astrum's the key, we need to know what Thaddeus knew. Mrs. Harrow coughed, her voice weak but sharp. Thaddeus built a room, hidden deeper than the tower. He called it the Star Chamber, said it was where he spoke to the void. Be careful, it's their place. Cillian snorted, his knife twirling in his hand. Their place? This whole town's theirs now. But fine, let's see what the madman left us. They waited until dawn, when the whispers quieted, though they never stopped completely. Eldridge was silent, its stone houses shuttered, streets empty under a sky heavy with clouds that seemed to pulse with faint blue light. The mansion loomed on the hill, its Gothic towers sharp against the gray vines choking its walls like twisted fingers. The door creaked open at Elias's touch. The air inside cold and stale, smelling of dust and something sharp, like metal or blood. Furniture lay draped in sheets, like ghosts waiting to rise, and the floorboards groaned under their steps, loud in the silence. They moved through the dark halls, lanterns high, shadows twitching in corners like living things. Mrs. Harrow led them, her steps slow but sure, to a staircase hidden behind a rotting tapestry. The spiral carvings on the wall glowed faintly, guiding them down into a deeper part of the mansion. The air grew colder, heavier, the smell of rust stronger, like the house was bleeding. At the bottom was a stone door, carved with stars and spirals, its edges glowing blue. This is it, Mrs. Harrow whispered, her voice trembling. The Star Chamber. Elias pushed the door, and it opened with a groan, revealing a vast room of stone, its walls covered in carvings, names, stars, paths twisting like veins. In the center stood a circular platform, raised like an altar, with a single object, a etched crystal, clear as glass but glowing with the same blue light as the spiral. Above, the ceiling was open to the sky, a dome of cracked glass showing stars that didn't belong. Too bright, too close, pulsing like eyes. This place is wrong, Amara said, her voice echoing, her locket glinting in the crystal's light. It's like the library, but worse. Elias nodded, his skin prickling. He stepped to the platform, touched the crystal. It was cold, burning his fingers, and visions hit him, stars twisting, voids opening, shadows carrying names across paths that led to Astrum, a star that burned with blue fire, its light a door to something vast and hungry. He stumbled back, gasping, his heart racing. What did you see? Cillian asked, his knife ready, eyes darting to the shadows creeping along the walls. The star? Elias said, voice shaking. Astrum, it's their gate. They're using it to bring their masters through. Mrs. Harrow's eyes widened. Thaddeus wrote about it, said he saw Astrum in the telescope, heard its voice. It's not just a star, it's alive. Amara opened Thaddeus's journal, found a page with a sketch of the crystal, surrounded by words in the old tongue. It says the crystal is their anchor, she read, her voice tight. It ties the paths to Astrum. If we break it, we cut the paths. Cillian's face darkened. Break it? Like we broke the orb, the stone, the book? Every time we try, they come back stronger. We have to try, Elias said, his voice firm. Or they'll take the whole town, maybe more. The room shook, a low rumble like the earth waking. The crystal glowed brighter, its light spilling across the walls, making the carved names pulse. Shadows poured from the stone, not just shapes but figures, tall and thin, with eyes like burning stars. They whispered, a chorus of names. Elias, Amara, Cillian, Vera, Harrow, Thaddeus, Astrum, and more. 1,000 voices from worlds far away. The air grew cold, heavy, pressing on their chests. Get back, Elias shouted, swinging his lantern. The shadows hissed, pulling away, but they didn't leave. They circled, their eyes burning, their whispers turning to screams. Amara grabbed a scroll from the platform, its edges glowing, and stuffed it into her coat. This has the ritual, she said, voice tight. We need it. Cillian slashed. At a shadow, his knife passing through like smoke. Run, he yelled, pushing Mrs. Harrow toward the door. The shadows lunged, their touch cold as ice, clawing at Elias's arms. He felt a pull, like his soul was being tugged away, visions flashing, dark voids, stars collapsing, things with no shape reaching through. They stumbled up the stairs, the shadows chasing, their screams echoing. The door slammed shut behind them, locking with a thud. The mansion shook, dust falling from the ceiling, and they ran outside, the air cold and sharp with coming rain. Mrs. Harrow collapsed, gasping, but alive. Back in the cottage, they spread, the scroll on the floor. Its lines showed the paths to Astrum, twisting through the void, and a ritual to break the crystal with light from the marked souls. "We need to use the crystal's own light," Amara said, her voice shaking. "But it has to be under Astrum, in the sky." Cillian's eyes darkened. "The hill again. It's the only place high enough." They set out at dusk, the town quiet, the air thick with the smell of rain. The hill was bare, its rocks sharp under their boots, the sky above dark with clouds, but pierced by stars. The crystal, carried carefully, glowed brighter, humming like a heartbeat. They set it on a flat stone, its light casting eerie shadows that moved on their own. Elias read the ritual, his voice steady despite the fear. "Per lumen animarum, frangimus ancorum." Amara and Cillian cut their palms, their blood dripping. Onto the crystal, glowing blue like the spiral. Mrs. Harrow joined, her voice weak but sure, her blood mixing with theirs. The sky cracked, a sliver of light spilling down, blue and sharp, like a blade. The paths shimmered, then snapped, the shadows screaming, a horrible noise that clawed at their ears. The crystal shook, its light blinding, then shattered, pieces falling like stars. The shadows faded, but not all. One stayed, tall and dark, its eyes like dying stars. It pointed, and a new name carved itself into the ground. Noctis. They stumbled back to the cottage, the crystal's shards left behind, glowing faintly. The spiral on the wall pulsed brighter, Noctis glowing beside it. Elias's heart pounded. "Noctis," he said, "it's not a star, it's the void." Amara's face was pale. "They're not just in the stars. They're in the dark between." Cillian's knife gleamed. "Then we find the void, and we end this." Chapter 10. The ritual of eternal marks Elias's cottage felt like a grave, the air thick and cold, pressing on them like wet dirt. The lantern's weak flame danced, throwing twisted shadows across the walls where the carved names glowed. Elias, Amara, Cillian, Eldridge, Vera, Harrow, Thaddeus, Astrum, and now Noctis. That last one burned brighter than the rest, its letters, sharp and deep like a cut that wouldn't heal. The spiral carving beside it pulsed with a dark blue light, slow and heavy, like the breath of something huge and hidden. Elias sat on the rough floor, his back against the stone wall, his hands shaking from the pain in his cut palm. Blood still crusted there from the ritual on the hill, where they'd shattered the crystal and closed more paths, but it hadn't stopped. The shadows. Amara knelt nearby, her storm-gray eyes fixed on her sister's locket, her dark hair falling like a curtain over her pale face. Cillian paced by the door, his knife tight in his fist, his graying hair messy, eyes darting to every scratch outside. Mrs. Harrow lay on a blanket in the corner, her face white as milk, her bandaged arm limp. She breathed slow, worn out from the blood she'd given. "Noctis," Elias whispered, his voice rough like sandpaper. The word felt heavy on his tongue, like saying it might call something bad. "It's the void, the dark between stars." They're marking that now. Amara's fingers clenched the locket so hard her knuckles turned white. First people, then the town, a star, and now the emptiness itself. What comes next? Everything. Cillian stopped pacing, his boots thumping hard on the floor. They're building. A chain. Each name binds more. If Noctis is marked, they're pulling the void closer, making it part of our world. Elias rubbed his eyes, tired and scared. His grandfather's journal sat open on his lap, its pages yellow and crinkled. The words blurred, but he knew them by heart. Shadows carved to tie souls, but eternal marks bind worlds. He hadn't understood before, but now it hit like a punch. The shadows weren't just hunting them. They were weaving a web across everything, using names like threads. Mrs. Harrow's weak voice broke the quiet. Thaddeus wrote about it, she said, her eyes half closed. A ritual to make marks eternal. He tried to stop it, but failed. It's in his last book, hidden in the mansion's basement. The basement. Elias's stomach twisted. They'd been there before, seen the black orb that pulsed like a heart, shattered it, but the shadows came back stronger. The mansion called to them again, like a trap waiting to snap. "We have to go," he said, standing slow, his legs aching. "If we find that book, maybe we can break the ritual before they finish." Amara looked up, her eyes wet but hard. "The mansion? Every time we go, we lose a piece of ourselves. Vera's name, my sister's. It's like they're taking our past too. We lose more if we stay," Cillian said, his voice low and grim. He slipped his knife into his belt and grabbed a lantern. "Let's move before the dark gets deeper." Mrs. Harrow tried to sit up, but winced and fell back. "I'm too weak. Go without me, but watch for the eternal marks. They glow forever, can't be erased." They left her with a fire burning low and the door barred tight. The night outside was black as ink, no moon, no stars, just clouds thick and low. The wind howled through the trees, carrying whispers that sounded like names half said. Eldridge slept, its stone houses dark, but Elias felt eyes on them, hidden in the shadows. The hill path to the mansion was muddy, boots sinking with each step, thorns snagging coats like fingers. Amara walked close to Elias, her hand brushing his, warm in the cold. "You think we can stop this?" she asked, voice soft. "We have to," Elias said, squeezing her hand, but inside, doubt chewed at him like rats in the walls. The mansion loomed big and dark, its towers like broken teeth against the sky. Vines choked the walls, rustling like they breathed. The door creaked open easy, too easy, as if the house wanted them inside. The air hit them stale and cold, smelling of dust and rot, with a sharp bite like old blood. Lanterns up, they moved, through halls where sheets on furniture looked like ghosts. Floorboards groaned loud, echoing like warnings. Shadows danced at the light's edge, long and thin, watching. "The basement," Elias said, leading to the narrow stairs they'd found before. The iron door at the bottom was open, swinging slow in, a draft that wasn't there. The room beyond was vast, walls covered in carvings, names glowing faint, thousands of them, some old and faded, some fresh like wounds. The stone table in the center was bare now, the orb gone, but a new glow came. From a crack in the wall, blue and pulsing, Cillian pointed his knife at it. "That's new." Elias nodded, heart thumping. He pushed the crack wider, revealing a small alcove with shelves of books and papers, yellowed and dusty. One book stood out, black cover with a spiral etched deep, glowing like the carvings. "This is it," he said, pulling it down. The leather felt cold, almost alive, pulsing under his fingers. Amara leaned close as he opened it. The pages were filled with Thaddeus's shaky writing, drawings of stars, voids, and shadows with eyes. Words jumped out. "Eternal marks bind the void to flesh. The ritual needs marked souls, blood, and the void's call. If done, Noctis opens. Old ones come through. Old ones." Amara whispered, her breath quick. "That's what they serve. Things from the dark." Cillian cursed soft. "How do we stop it?" Elias flipped pages, finding a section on breaking the marks. "There's a counter-ritual. Needs 3 marked ones, like us. Blood mixed. Words said under the void's gaze, meaning a clear sky. And a vessel to hold the marks, like this book." Before they could read more, the room shook hard, stones rattling. The carvings on the walls glowed brighter, names pulsing like hearts. Shadows slid from the cracks, not just dark spots, but shapes with arms and eyes like hot coals. Whispers filled the air, loud and sharp, saying their names over and over. Elias, Amara, Cillian, Noctis. "Out!" Cillian yelled, knife slashing at a shadow that lunged. It hissed like steam, pulling back, but not gone. Elias grabbed the book, stuffing it under his coat. Amara swung her lantern, light pushing the shadows away, but they circled faster, cold touch brushing their skin like frost. They ran up the stairs, boots pounding, hearts racing. The iron door slammed shut behind, but whispers followed, seeping through stone. The mansion groaned like it hurt, dust falling from ceilings. They burst outside, rain starting light, cold drops on faces. The hill path was slick now, mud pulling at boots, but they didn't stop till the cottage. Mrs. Harrow sat up when they entered, eyes wide. "You found it?" Elias nodded, panting, laying the book on the floor. "The ritual of eternal marks. They're trying to make Noctis permanent, to open a door that can't close." Amara knelt, flipping pages. "The counter-ritual says we need to do it where the void is closest. The hill, under the stars. Mix our blood in the book, say the words, burn it with starfire." "Starfire again," Cillian said, remembering the meteor stone they'd used before. The fields scorched, but the stone's still there, glowing. Mrs. Harrow's face tightened. "Hurry! If they finish first, the marks become eternal. No breaking them." The rain stopped by midnight, sky clearing slow, stars peeking sharp and cold. They slipped out, lanterns low, whispers chasing like ghosts. The town felt empty, but lights flickered in some windows, people waking to scratches on doors. Elias wondered if more names were carving in homes, binding more souls. The field by the mill was wet, grass slick, the scorched spot black where they'd burned the library book. The meteor stone sat half buried, glowing faint blue, humming soft. Elias set the black book beside it, opened to the counter-ritual page. The words were strange, hard to say, like stones in the mouth. Amara cut her palm first, blood dripping dark on the pages, soaking in like the paper thirsted. "For Vera," she whispered, eyes wet. Cillian went next, his cut quick, blood mixing with hers. "For the town." Elias last, pain sharp, blood joining, the page glowing now, names rising like smoke. They chanted together, voices low at first, then louder. "Umbrae aeternae, sanguis noster frangit vincula, noctis clod, Marcus Dele." The air grew cold, wind, picking up swirling leaves and dirt. The meteor stone glowed brighter, flames licking up blue and hot. Not normal fire, but starlight trapped. Shadows came fast, pouring from trees, ground, sky. They swirled around the field, eyes glowing red, whispers turning to screams. Names flew like arrows: Elias, Amara, Noctis. The book shook, pages flipping wild, but they held it down, chanting harder. The fire caught the book, blue flames eating. The edges, smoke thick and black, smelling of burnt stars. Visions hit Elias, void opening, old ones stirring, huge and formless, hungering for light. He shook them off, voice breaking but not stopping. A shadow lunged at Amara, cold claws on her arm. She screamed, swinging the locket like a weapon. It hit the shadow, light flashing from the metal, making it hiss and fade. Cillian slashed with his knife, buying time. The book burned hotter, names curling to ash, the spiral on the page twisting like it fought. Then a crack in the sky, loud like thunder, blue light spilling down. The void showed, black, endless, with eyes bigger than stars watching. The shadows wailed, pulling back. But one big one stayed, tall as trees, eyes like black holes. It reached, carving in the air, a new mark glowing. Eternal. The book exploded in ash, fire dying, but the mark hung there, not fading. Elias's heart sank. "We stopped the ritual," he said, voice shaking. But not all. Amara clutched her arm, blood mixing with shadow cold. "The eternal marks. They're starting." Cillian grabbed them, pulling to run. "Back to the cottage. We need to think." But as they fled, the sky darkened more, stars winking out, the void closer. Whispers laughed now, promising more marks, eternal ones that bound forever. Back in the cottage, barred tight, the walls shook soft. The carved names glowed, but Noctis pulsed strongest, and a new one appeared below, eternal. Mrs. Harrow stared, face pale. "You broke the ritual, but they adapted. The eternal marks are here. They bind not just souls, but time itself." Elias flipped through what was left of Thaddeus's notes, ash on fingers. There's one more way, a final stand in the void's heart. Where? Amara asked, voice trembling. The mansion's star chamber, Mrs. Harrow said. It's the closest to Noctis. But going there now, it's suicide. Cillian gripped his knife. Then we die fighting. They rested short, but sleep didn't come. Visions haunted Elias, eternal marks spreading, binding stars, towns, worlds. At dawn, gray and dim, they set out again. Rain fell steady, mud thick, but the mansion called, its towers visible through mist. Inside, the air was heavier, smells stronger, rot, blood, whispers loud as talk. They went to the star chamber, the stone door open, glowing blue. The room inside pulsed, walls carvings moving like alive, names twisting. The platform hummed, crystal shards from before glowing. On the floor. We need to call the void, Elias said, reading from a scrap of paper. Mix blood again, say the break words, but in the chamber's light. Amara nodded, cutting her palm fresh, pain sharp. Blood dripped on the platform, glowing. Cillian and Elias joined, blood pooling, swirling like a storm. Mrs. Harrow, weaker but... There, added hers. For Eldridge, she whispered. They chanted, Aeternalis Marcus, Frangimus perlusum animarum. The dome above cracked, glass falling, sky opening. Stars swirled wrong, void peeking through, black and hungry. Shadows flooded, filling the room, eyes everywhere. Whispers screamed names, eternal now, binding tight. Elias felt pull, soul stretching, visions of endless dark. Amara grabbed his hand, holding on. Don't let go. The platform glowed hot, blood boiling, light bursting up. Shadows shrieked, some fading to smoke. But the big one, the eternal shadow, grew, arms reaching, carving in the air. Bend. The light hit it, cracking its form. But it laughed, voice like cracking stone. The void widened, old ones stirring, forms shifting in dark. We can't hold it, Cillian yelled, knife dropping as cold took him. Elias chanted louder, light brighter, but the eternal marks spread, carving on their skin now, faint lines on arms, glowing. The room shook, violent, walls cracking, dome shattering. They fell back, light fading, shadows retreating slow. The void closed a bit, but not full. Panting, they looked at arms, eternal marks faint but there, binding them tighter. It's not over, Amara said, tears mixing with rain through broken dome. Elias nodded, fear cold in gut. The old ones are coming. We unleash them. Outside, sky darkened, stars falling like rain, whispers turning to roars. Eldridge woke to screams, names carving on every stone, eternal marks spreading like fire. They ran from the mansion, but the void followed, old ones whispering welcome. The group huddled in the ruins of the star chamber, shards cutting feet, rain soaking. Elias's arm burned where the eternal mark glowed, a spiral twisting under skin. We have to seal it, he said, voice hoarse. Amara's eyes were wide, locket cold against her chest. How? The ritual failed. Cillian picked up his knife, blade bent now. We go into the void, fight from inside. Mrs. Harrow shook head. That's madness. You'd be lost. Better lost than bound eternal, Cillian said. They agreed, no choice left. Elias found a final page in Thaddeus's notes. To enter Noctis, use the chamber's light, blood as key. They stood on the platform, blood fresh, chanting new words. Ad noctis intramus, animus, offerimus. The light burst again, void opening wide, pulling them in. Cold wrapped, whispers deafened, names eternal carving souls. Inside the void, dark endless, stars like eyes, old ones loomed, huge, shifting, hunger in forms no mind could hold. Elias floated, bound by marks, but fought, light. From blood pushing back, Amara beside, her light joining, Cillian's too, Mrs. Harrow's weak, but there. The old ones roared, shadows swarming, but their light grew, cracking the eternal marks. A burst bright as day, void shaking. They fell back to the chamber, gasping. Marks fading slow, but the old ones stirred more. Gate cracking wider. We weakened them, Elias said. But they're free now. The sky tore. Cosmic terrors spilling through. Names binding forever. Chapter 12. Cosmic Terrors Unleashed. The void's cold lingered in Elias's bones, like frost that wouldn't thaw. The star chamber lay in ruins around them, its stone walls cracked, the dome shattered, letting in a sky that bled black and blue. Rain fell hard, soaking their clothes, mixing with blood from their cut palms. The eternal marks on their arms, spirals twisting under skin, glowed faint but stubborn, a reminder of their fight in the void. Elias stood on the broken platform, heart pounding, his dark hair plastered to his face. Amara clutched her sister's locket, her storm-gray eyes wide, searching the dark for answers. Cillian gripped his bent knife, his graying hair dripping, his face hard as the stones around them. Mrs. Harrow leaned against a crumbling wall, her bandaged arm trembling, her breath shallow. The air smelled of wet earth, blood, and something wrong, like stars burning out. Whispers roared outside, no longer soft but loud, like a storm of voices screaming names. Elias, Amara, Cillian, Noctis, Eternal. We let them out. Elias said, voice rough, barely heard over the rain. The void had opened wide, the old ones, huge, shapeless things with eyes like dying suns, spilling through. The eternal marks tied them to this horror, binding their souls to a gate that wouldn't close. Amara's fingers shook on the locket, Vera's face staring from it like a ghost. We weakened them, she said, teeth chattering. But they're here now, in Eldridge. Cillian spat into the mud, his knife gleaming dim in the lantern's weak light. They're not just here. Those things are spreading. Listen. The whispers were everywhere, clawing through the rain, saying names of people, places, stars. The sky churned, clouds swirling like a wound, blue light pulsing where stars should be. Elias's grandfather's journal, soaked in his coat, weighed, heavy. Its words burned in his mind. Eternal marks bind worlds. The old ones weren't just after souls now. They wanted everything, earth and sky, tied by names that wouldn't fade. Mrs. Harrow coughed, her voice thin as paper. Thaddeus warned of this. The gates opened because of the marks. Only way to stop it is to unmake them, all of them. How? Amara asked, stepping closer, rain streaming down her pale face. We burned the book, broke the crystal, fought in the void. What's left? Mrs. Harrow's eyes, sharp despite her weakness, fixed on Elias. Your grandfather knew. He hid something, a key to unmake the marks. Not in the mansion, but in town, the old church where I was. Elias's stomach twisted. The church, with its broken steeple and blood-stained altar, felt like a trap waiting to snap. But the eternal. Marks on their arms pulsed, urging them to move. Then we go, he said, voice steady despite the fear gnawing his chest. Before they take more, Cillian nodded, his knife tight in his fist. Stick together. Those things are out there, not just shadows anymore. They stumbled from the mansion, rain blinding, mud sucking at boots. The hill path was a river of sludge, thorns tearing at coats like claws. Eldridge below was dark, no lights in windows, houses silent as graves. But screams echoed, faint and far, and names carved themselves into stone walls as they passed. Eldridge, Noctis, Eternal, and new ones, strangers' names glowing blue. The old ones were marking the town, binding it to their will. The church stood at the town's edge, its steeple jagged against the sky, windows boarded like shut eyes. The door hung open, creaking in the wind, rain pooling inside. The air smelled of damp wood, wax and blood, sharp and fresh. Elias's lantern flickered, casting long shadows that moved wrong, stretching like fingers. Amara clutched the locket, her breath quick, eyes darting. Cillian led, knife ready, his boots loud on the wet floor. Mrs. Harrow leaned on Elias, her steps slow, face gray. Over here, Mrs. Harrow whispered, pointing to the altar, its stone. Cracked, stained with her blood from the last ritual. Carvings covered it now, Names, spirals, and something new. A symbol like a broken star, glowing blue, pulsing fast. Elias knelt, running fingers over the symbol. It burned cold, like the void's touch. "This is it," he said, voice low. "The key. Grandfather wrote about a star that breaks bonds. This must be it." Amara opened her sister's locket, Vera's face pale in the dim light. "How do we use it?" Mrs. Harrow sank onto a pew, her voice weak. "Your grandfather said the broken star needs light, not ours, but theirs. The old one's light. You have to call them, draw their power into it." Cillian cursed, his knife pointing at the altar. "Call them? They're already here, you hear that?" The whispers were louder, no longer just names but words, strange and sharp, cutting the air like glass. The church shook, pews rattling, and shadows poured from walls, not shapes but figures, tall, thin, with eyes like burning stars. They moved slow, deliberate, carrying names that floated like smoke. Elias's eternal mark burned, a spiral twisting tighter on his arm. "We don't have time," Elias said, grabbing a candle from the altar, its wax cold and heavy. He lit it with his lantern, the flame weak but steady. "We do it now." Amara nodded, cutting her palm fresh, blood dripping onto the broken star symbol. "For Vera," she whispered, tears mixing with rain. Cillian sliced his hand, blood joining hers, his face grim. "For Eldridge." Elias went last, pain sharp, blood pooling, the symbol glowing brighter, blue light pulsing like a heart. Mrs. Harrow chanted, voice breaking but strong. "Per lumen vetus, frangimus marcas aeternas." The words hurt to hear, like nails in ears. The shadows screamed, a horrible sound, like wind tearing through stone. The broken star glowed hot, light spilling, not warm but cold, like the void itself. The old ones came then, not just shadows, but forms, huge, shifting, no edges, just darkness with eyes bigger than moons. They filled the church, pressing against walls, their voices a roar of names: Elias, Amara, Cillian, Noctis, Eternal, and more, thousands, from worlds long gone. Elias's vision blurred, voids opening in his mind, stars dying, things hungering for light. "Hold on," Amara yelled, grabbing his hand, her blood warm against his. Cillian slashed at a shadow, knife useless but defiant. Mrs. Harrow kept chanting, her voice fading, blood dripping from her nose. The broken star burned brighter, light cutting through, the dark hitting the old ones. They wailed, forms cracking like glass, pieces falling like black rain. The eternal marks on their arms faded, just a bit, but the shadows fought back, pushing closer, cold wrapping Elias's heart. He felt his soul pull, like it might tear away. "Keep going!" he shouted, voice raw. The candle flame grew, fed by the symbol's light, burning blue and hot. The old ones roared, one lunging, its eyes swallowing light. Amara swung her locket, its metal flashing, driving it back. Cillian threw his knife, embedding it in the altar, blood and light mixing. The church shook, walls cracking, the steeple groaning above. The broken star exploded in light, blinding, and the old ones screamed, a sound that broke windows, glass raining down. The shadows faded, some gone, some retreating, but the biggest one stayed, tall, endless, eyes like black holes. It reached, carving in the air. Forever. The light died, the symbol dark, the candle out. Elias's arm still burned, the eternal mark, fainter but there. They fell to their knees, panting, rain soaking through. The old ones were weaker, but not gone. The church was quiet, but whispers lingered, promising more. "We did it," Amara said, voice shaking, clutching the locket. "Didn't we?" Mrs. Harrow slumped, barely breathing. "You broke some marks," she whispered, "but forever. It's their last chain. They'll come again." Cillian pulled his knife from the altar, its blade cracked. "Where?" Elias's. Heart sank, his grandfather's journal heavy in his coat. "The mill," he said. "It's where it started. Where they marked you, Cillian. They carried Mrs. Harrow, too weak to walk, back to the cottage through rain that felt like tears. The town was waking, screams louder now, names carved on every wall glowing blue. The eternal mark. Forever spread, binding houses, streets, people. In the cottage, they laid Mrs. Harrow on a blanket, her face pale as death. Elias opened the journal, finding a final note in his grandfather's shaky hand. The mill holds their first anchor, a stone of Noctis. Break it, or forever binds all. Amara's eyes widened. The mill's attic, the mirror where we saw Vera. Cillian nodded, face grim. Then we go. End it. They waited till dawn, sky gray, rain slowing. The mill loomed by the river, its wheels still, moss thick, the house beside it dark. The attic was cold, air heavy with rot and whispers. The mirror stood, cracked but glowing, showing not their faces but the void, black, endless, with eyes watching. Elias cut his palm, blood dripping on the mirror's frame, the broken star symbol carved there glowing. Amara and Cillian joined, blood mixing, chanting, Per sanguinem, frangimus forever. Mrs. Harrow carried up, added her blood, voice barely a whisper. The mirror glowed hot, light bursting, blue and sharp. The void opened, old ones lunging, their forms filling the attic, shadow swirling. Elias's eternal mark burned, visions hitting, worlds bound, stars falling, forever carving all. Amara grabbed his hand, Cillian's knife slashed, Mrs. Harrow chanted last words. The mirror cracked, light exploding, shadows screaming, the old ones retreated, but forever glowed brighter, carving deeper in the floor. They fell back, gasping, the attic shaking. The void closed, but not fully. A new name carved beside forever, Omnia. Elias's heart stopped. Omnia, he whispered. Everything. Amara's face was white, locket cold. They're binding it all, earth, sky, void. Cillian's knife fell, useless. We're out of time. Mrs. Harrow's eyes closed, breath gone. The whispers roared, Omnia glowing, the old ones laughing, their forms spilling into Eldridge, binding forever. Chapter 13. Names that bind. Forever rain pounded Elias's cottage, leaking through cracks in the roof, pooling on the floor where the carved names glowed. Elias, Amara, Cillian, Eldridge, Vera, Harrow, Thaddeus, Astrum, Noctis, Eternal, Forever, and now Omnia. The newest name burned brightest, its letters deep and jagged, like a wound in the stone. The spiral carving on the wall pulsed with a sick blue light, fast and wild, like a heart about to burst. Elias stood frozen, his cut palm throbbing, blood still crusted from the mill's ritual. His dark hair clung to his face, wet with rain and sweat, his breath quick and shallow. Amara sat slumped against the wall, her storm-gray eyes dull, clutching her sister's locket, its metal cold against her chest. Cillian knelt by Mrs. Harrow's body, her face pale as death, her breath gone after the attic's fight. His knife cracked and useless lay beside him, his graying hair dripping, his face hard but broken. The air smelled of wet stone, blood, and something darker, like stars rotting in the sky. Whispers roared outside, no longer just voices but a storm of names, screaming Omnia, binding everything. Omnia, Elias whispered, voice shaking, the word heavy like a stone in his mouth. Everything. They're taking it all. Earth, sky, void. Amara's fingers tightened on the locket, Vera's face inside a ghost that haunted her. We broke the mirror, the crystal, the book, she said, voice cracking. Why can't we stop them? Cillian stood, fists clenched, his eyes like burned-out coals. Because they're bigger than us. The old ones don't just want souls now, they want worlds. Omnia means they're binding it all together. Elias's heart pounded, his grandfather's journal heavy in his soaked coat. Its final words echoed. The mill's stone of Noctis is their first anchor. Break it, or forever binds all. They'd tried in the attic, shattered the mirror, but Omnia's carving meant they'd failed. The old ones, huge, shapeless things with eyes like dying stars, were free, spilling into Eldridge, their whispers carving names on every stone, every tree, every breath. "We missed something," Elias said, pacing, boots splashing in puddles. "The millstone. Grandfather said it's the first anchor. We didn't find it." Amara's eyes flicked up, hope faint but sharp. The attic had the mirror, but no stone. "Maybe it's deeper, under the mill." Cillian snorted, grabbing his broken knife. "Deeper? That place is their nest. We go back, we're walking into their jaws." "We're already in them," Elias snapped, his voice raw. "Look outside." Through the cottage's cracked window, Eldridge was a nightmare. Houses glowed with carved names, blue light pulsing, people screaming as shadows moved, tall and thin, with eyes like stars. The sky churned, black clouds splitting, blue light bleeding where stars should be. Amara stood, locket swinging, her face pale but set. "If the stone's there, we find it. Break it. End this." Cillian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. But we go armed, not just knives. Fire, blood, whatever hurts them." They rummaged the cottage, finding candles, a rusty axe, and a bottle of lamp oil. Elias tucked the journal tight, its pages soggy but readable. They left at dawn, sky gray and heavy, rain slowing to a drizzle. Eldridge was chaos. Doors hung open, names carved on walls, some glowing, some fading, as if the old ones were choosing who to bind next. Screams echoed, distant but sharp, and shadows moved in alleys, whispering Omnia. The mill loomed by the river, its wheels still, moss thick, the house beside it dark as a grave. The air smelled of rot and rust, heavier now, like the void itself was leaking in. They entered through the broken door, lanterns flickering, casting shadows that twisted wrong. The attic stairs creaked, but Elias stopped, feeling a pull, like the mill was breathing. "Not up," he said, voice low. "Down," the journal said under. They found a trapdoor in the house's floor, hidden under a rug, its wood carved with spirals. Cillian pried it open with his knife, revealing a staircase spiraling into darkness, air cold and sharp, like breathing knives. The smell hit them, blood, stone, and something alive, pulsing. Elias led, lantern high, its light barely cutting the black. Amara followed, locket clutched, her breath quick. Cillian brought up the rear, axe in one hand, knife in the other. The stairs ended in a vast room, stone walls dripping wet, covered in carvings. Names, thousands, glowing blue, pulsing like veins. In the center stood a stone, black and smooth, bigger than a man, etched with the spiral and Omnia, glowing so bright it hurt to look. It hummed, low and deep, like a heart in the earth. Shadows swirled around it, not just shapes but figures, tall, thin, eyes like burning stars, whispering names that echoed in Elias's skull. "This is it," Elias said, voice shaking. "The Noctis stone, their first anchor." Amara stepped closer, locket glowing faint in the stone's light. "How do we break it?" Cillian gripped his axe, face grim. "Smash it, burn it, whatever it takes." Elias opened the journal, finding a final ritual scribbled in his grandfather's hand. To unmake the Noctis stone, use blood of the marked, light of the bound, and will of the living. Speak the names, all of them, and offer the last light. He read aloud, voice trembling. "We need to name everyone carved. Us, the town, the stars, all of it. Then burn it with our blood." Amara's eyes widened. "All the names? There's thousands." "We don't have a choice," Elias said, pulling a candle from his pocket, lighting it with a match. The flame flickered, weak but stubborn. "We start now." They cut their palms again, blood dripping onto the stone, pooling in the carvings. "Glowing blue," Elias began, voice hoarse. "Elias, Amara, Cillian, Eldridge, Vera, Harrow, Thaddeus, Astrum, Noctis, Eternal, Forever, Omnia." Amara joined, then Cillian, their voices mixing, shaking but strong. The stone hummed louder, the shadows screaming, a horrible sound like tearing sky. Names poured from them. Some they knew, some they didn't. Strangers, Ancestors, stars, worlds. The candle burned brighter, fed by their blood, flame turning. Blue, hot as starlight. The shadows lunged, cold claws grabbing at arms, legs, hearts. Elias felt his soul pull, visions hitting, voids endless, old ones rising, Omnia binding all in dark. "Keep going," Amara yelled, her locket flashing, driving a shadow back. Cillian swung his axe, hitting the stone, sparks flying, but it didn't crack. The whispers roared, names piling, crushing their minds. Elias's eternal mark burned, spiral twisting. But he chanted louder, naming every carving he saw, every whisper he heard. The stone glowed hotter, light blinding, and the old ones came. Forms huge and shifting, no edges, just eyes and hunger. They filled the room, pressing walls, their voices a storm of Omnia, forever, eternal. Elias's candle burned his hand, but he held it, blood dripping, flame eating the stone's light. Amara grabbed his arm, her blood mixing with his, her voice breaking. "For Vera." Cillian's axe hit again, a crack sounding, small but real. "For Eldridge." The stone shook, names fading, but the old ones pushed closer, their touch cold as death, pulling souls. The candle flared, blue fire roaring, and Elias poured lamp oil on the stone, the flame catching, burning wild. The shadows screamed, a sound that broke the air, and the stone cracked, light spilling like blood. The old ones wailed, forms cracking like glass, but the biggest one stayed, tall, endless, eyes like black holes. It reached, carving in the air, all. The stone exploded, light blinding, throwing them back. The shadows faded, some gone, some retreating, but the old one's laughter lingered, deep and cold. The eternal marks on their arms burned, fainter but there. The room was quiet, rain dripping through cracks above, but whispers stayed, soft and sharp. "We did it," Amara gasped, clutching the locket, tears mixing with rain. "The stone's gone." Cillian picked up his axe, its blade chipped. "Not enough. That last mark. All. They're not done." Elias's heart sank, his grandfather's journal open on the floor, pages scorched. "They're binding everything. Omnia. All. It's the same. They want the world." They climbed out, legs shaking, rain soaking through. Eldridge was silent now, no screams, but names still glowed on walls, fainter but not gone. The sky was dark, stars hidden, blue light pulsing where the void leaked. Back in the cottage, they sat, bloodied and tired. The spiral on the wall was dim, but all glowed beside it, a promise of more. Amara's voice was small. "What now?" Elias looked at the journal, its last page blank except for one line. "The final stand is in the heart of all names." He closed it, heart heavy. "The church," he said. "It's where the broken star was, the heart of this." Cillian nodded, face grim. One last fight, all or nothing. They set out at dusk, sky black, rain gone, air thick with whispers. The church loomed, its steeple broken, windows glowing blue. Inside, the altar was cracked, the broken star symbol faint but pulsing. Shadows waited, eyes like stars, whispering all. Elias lit a candle, blood dripping on the altar, Amara and Cillian joining. They chanted, voices one, "Per sanguinem et lutum, frangimus all." The symbol glowed, light bursting, shadows screaming. The old ones came, filling the church, their forms endless, hunger endless. The light grew, burning their marks, breaking bonds. The shadows faded, but the biggest one stayed, carving all on the altar, laughing. The church shook, walls falling, and the void opened above, old ones reaching. Elias grabbed Amara's hand, Cillian's axe raised, their light pushing back. But all glowed brighter, binding tighter, and the old ones stepped through, their forms swallowing light, promising forever.